Bhagwan Shri Yogi Ramsuratkumar ki jai. Sarvam Yogi Ramsuratkumar Ashram. With a heart full of gratitude on this Yugadi day, the Telugu New Year day. I think it's also Parsi New Year day. We have started our new year with powerful Nama Sankirtan of our Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar. Before we submit our today's prayers, let us return to the topic which we were discussing yesterday. If you remember, we were dealing with the question, why would a Mahatma smoke? Especially when smoking is considered as harmful to the body, to the health of the body. Especially smoking is something considered as a bad habit, especially more when smoking is considered as disgrace for a Mahatma. We saw how Bhagwan came to smoke and what important work of his father was getting done in that. It was not for the joy of it, not for concentration or anything. It was simply because his father said so. Take to smoking. You will be able to be with people and do my work. That is how it came to pass. Now today morning, when I stood before Bhagwan with my hands as my begging bowl and asked for something to relate to people, to the devotees, I came across two incidents, interesting narrations by two devotees. And we shall share and relive those experiences with them. The first one was Srimati Pankajam Das. She had spoken in one of her speeches on a function. She said she had come to Bhagwan a few years earlier, but it was in 1980. She started to take cigarette boxes as an offering to him. The first time she bought 10 cigarette boxes and was a little afraid to take them to him. But somehow it struck her, Bhagwan was smoking so much so why not take cigarette boxes to him? It might be welcome. But then she was not very sure. She did buy it, and when she came by bus, you know how she had wrapped it? Paper after paper. She was afraid the smell of the cigarette boxes would come out and embarrass her. So she took several papers and wrapped them safely so that no smell would come out. Such was the caution she took. And of course, over that, she bought some grapes and sugar candy, this and that, some dates, which he seemed to like at that time. As soon as she reached Bhagwan's Sannidhi Street abode, she prostrated before him after keeping the offering at his feet. He immediately pulled her bag and started to remove the items one by one. Finally, he came to the wrapper. He took out paper after paper after paper after paper. He began to smile, and then he saw 10 cigarette boxes, took them out, and told her with a smile, yes, this beggar would put it to use. This beggar would use them. So that's how it started, and afterwards, every time she went to him, she always carried 10 cigarette boxes, knowing very well that he would use all of them. But she was given an instruction that she should not take more than 10 cigarette boxes at a time. She was happy with it. And the one time that she came to see, she found Bhagwan coughing so much, she decided cigarette smoking is not good for this cough. That next time when she came, she did not bring any cigarette boxes. As usual, Bhagwan took her back, began to remove the offerings that she had brought for him, one after the other, but he could not find any cigarette boxes. Immediately he made a gesture with both his hands as if to say, oh, it's not seen, it's not there. Meaning, the cigarette boxes he expected were not there. She said, Swami, you had cough, so I thought I should not add to the burden because the smoking is not good for a coughing throat. He said, oh, all right. He accepted it. And just at that moment, somebody came. And that somebody said that Subbayamat, Champakatamma, had sent word asking that she was going to conduct Maheshwara Puja, Sadhu Puja, the next day. Sadhu Bhojan, they call it Maheshwara Puja. The Bhojan must be given to every sadhu in the bhavana, in the attitude of offering to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva himself. Bhagwan said, yes, this beggar would come, but tell Champakatamma, not just one, but 2 people will be coming, pointing to Pankajam Das. The next day, of course, he asked her to come. And then he took her, locked the house, and both of them began to walk. Somewhere near Pegopuram, Bhagwan just sat down on one of the slabs there, or benches. Then he made attempts as though he was looking for something. He put his hand in his left side deep pocket, the deep pocket of his kurta. And then he came to the right side, put his hand deep into his pocket. Those pockets were always deep. I know because whenever he had to remove a shirt and put on a new one, because some devotees had brought it and he felt obliged to change, I had handled them. That was another precise ritual. Maybe I would talk about it someday, Bhagwan willing. So he put his hands deep into his pockets, only to come out empty-handed. And then he made gesture the very same way as he did in the veranda of Sannadhi Street House when he found out that Pankajam Das had not brought anything for him, not brought any cigarette boxes for him. And then he said, Pankajam, this beggar has forgotten to bring cigarette boxes. This beggar would need them. Will you go buy some from the nearest shop for this beggar? And then he gave some money to her. Pankajam said, Swamiji, that shop nearby, they don't sell the brand of cigarettes that you smoke. I have to go to another shop where I usually buy and get them. Bhagwan smiled and said, No, Pankajam, this beggar knows it's available in the shop. Will you please go get it? Pankajam knew immediately that it was a play he was acting out in order to punish her for not bringing the cigarette boxes as usual. Bhagwan was a very strict disciplinarian. If he had said something to us, he would expect us to continue and not change without telling him. Now this time, Pankajam made her own decision after seeing his coughing throat. So she thought this was his way of disciplining her. She thought it was a punishment. She went and tried in the shop, and true to his word, it was available. She bought 2 cigarette boxes and 1 matchbox and brought them to him. Now it was okay. Whatever he missed out on finding that she had not brought out is well compensated for. For Bhagwan, everything is related to his father's work. Everything is related to his work upon us. Right from the moment we enter his presence, right from the moment we entered his presence, his work would start on us. Whether he was smiling at us, or whether his countenance was serious, or he was angry with us, or he was talking to someone else, ignoring us, whatever was his action, that was included in his work upon us. So whatever we took as offering to him, he would accept only if it was within his father's work. Otherwise, I had seen him return some of the offerings to people. I remember once somebody had brought many laddus. And Bhagwan, for some strange reason, said, "No, this beggar cannot accept it. You please take it." It was getting to be nearly 1:30 or 2 late in the afternoon. He was telling me that he had some urgent work of father's and he had to go in. He was going to close. And when this man came, after he left, Bhagwan turned to me and said, "You see, Devaki, if this beggar accepted this beggar had to work for him. This beggar would not be able to work right now because he is busy with some other work of father. So this beggar cannot accept it." And that's how I got a glimpse of his way of working. Now we should come back to the story. After Pankajam got those 2 cigarette boxes and a matchbox, they went over to the mutt where the sadhu bhojan was being arranged. And of course, the other details are left for another occasion. Enough to say this serves our purpose, that Bhagwan needed those cigarettes for his father's work. It's not the same as others smoke. It was never for joy. He always knew that it was harmful to the body, and he kept a piece of gooseberry, like I said yesterday, a piece of gooseberry all the time in the mouth, so much so he lost all sense of taste. Now after Pankajam spoke, Dr. Ramanathan rose to comment on that, and then he said, at that time, Srimati Pankajam Das might have thought it was a punishment for her, but now she would know better. She would definitely, surely know better that it was all grace only. Everything that Bhagwan did or said was only a blessing to all of us. And then he went on to narrate his experience. He began to look after Bhagwan as a doctor as per the instruction of Bhagwan. One day the report came to him in Chennai that Bhagwan was having high BP, that maybe his medicine had to be checked. So he knew he had to come in person and take this BP with an apparatus at different times of the day, because he said all through the day, in some situation or the other, with some action or the other, the BP was likely to change. So he had to make sure, do it a few times and then decide. So he had brought it, and then the conversation turned to BP. Bhagwan asked him, "Oh, you have come to take the BP of this beggar? Do you think the BP changes because of some pressure? What pressure it could be?" Pat came the reply from Dr. Ramanathan. He said, "Swami, obviously it is Bhakta's pressure." Bhagwan laughed he laughed so much. And then he said, so you think it is pressure from bhaktas, that's why it's called a BP. And you think this blood pressure changes accordingly? And then Bhagwan went on to ask, the smoking, do you think the smoking would change the BP, the blood pressure? Dr. Ramanathan said, yes, generally it does, but I do not know about Bhagwan. But it is better not to smoke, because the smoking would definitely increase blood pressure. This is what we say to the patients. And then again he said apologetically, Bhagwan, I do not know what is involved in your smoking. So I cannot decide one way or the other, but I can find out your BP a few times, and from the reading I can decide. Then Bhagwan said, Father wanted Dr. Ramanathan to look after this beggar and give medicine. So this beggar would accept whatever you say and take whatever medicine you prescribe. And then Bhagwan added with a smile, a mischievous smile, but Dr. Ramanathan, Father also says that this beggar should continue smoking for his father's work. So you see, though many of us smiled, we also understood that it was imperative, necessary for father's work, that it was no ordinary smoking. I remember another incident. On the Grihapravesam day of Sudama, before Dr. Ramanathan, the first time Bhagwan had viral fever, it was, and even before that, I think in the 1990, Bhagwan had an ulcer problem and he was vomiting blood. Just one day before, the news had come that the child of a devotee, just 1.5 years, was vomiting blood and was in critical condition. Soon after that, Bhagwan started to vomit blood. So much so, he became very weak and he could not even get up. It was so pathetic to see Bhagwan crawling. He was unable to stand and walk. At the time, it was Dr. Radhakrishnan. Bhagwan was taken with Bhagwan's permission by Bharaknath Reddy to Kripa, his house, the garden house, opposite to Ramanashram. And there, Bhagwan had to stay for the next 10 days. And it happened that I had the opportunity also to come there and spend all those 10 days with Bhagwan. That was another story. We wouldn't go into the details now, except that Dr. Radhakrishnan was looking after him. And it continued, and after that, the Grihapravesam took place. On the Grihapravesam day, Bhagwan had to smoke a lot. He was leaning on the compound wall of Sudama, sitting there and smoking, and Dr. Radhakrishnan was seated next to him. And Bhagwan, with a mischievous smile, would tell Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Radhakrishnan, will you light the cigarette for this beggar? So he made the doctor himself light it. And then Bhagwan would say again, smiling, Dr. Radhakrishnan doesn't want this beggar to smoke. He has said it several times, but this beggar is not obeying him. This beggar has to obey Father. This beggar takes permission from Dr. Radhakrishnan to continue to smoke. So you see, every time it was the same. As he said yesterday, Sri Aurobindo had smoked. He used to smoke a long cigar. And there were other prominent saints who also smoked, especially in the north. Bhagwan was smoking, was burning away the karmas of the people only by his smoking. It was not exactly an addiction with him, because sometime afterwards, in 2000, when he had shifted his darshan from Pradhan Mandir to Parnashala, he continued to smoke despite his illness. It was already found out that he was having cancer, yet there was no stopping him. He had to continue doing this. Nobody had the power to stop him. But one day, exactly at 5 o'clock, he just put down the last cigarette and said, "Devaki, this beggar will not smoke." And that was all. They could just like that give up this habit. It was no addiction. He could do it in a fraction of a second. We still have that last cigarette, and then the bag containing the rest of the cigarettes and the matchbox with what he smoked, and the matchsticks that he used in the abode for display. I remember about Raman Maharishi also. He used to have the habit of taking betel leaves. People found him sometimes taking it. And then one day one of the devotees commented, "Oh, you also have an addiction or something?" And Raman Maharishi said, "No, there's no such thing. I don't have to eat it." And that was all. He stopped, and after that he never used. They had everything under their control. Now I remember there was another incident when this ashram started from 93. Those 7 years he stayed at Sudama. He smoked profusely. So much so, 5,000 plus empty cigarette boxes I collected. Every day, at the end of the day, he would drop 5 or 6, but 6 was maximum, 4 or 5. He would drop them, empty cigarette boxes, into my hand. And that's how I collected them all. And after that, one day, he saw me arranging all the cigarette boxes in one huge box after the other. He asked me with a smile, "Devaki, what would you do with all this?" I said, "Bhagwan, They are not empty cigarette boxes. Each one is full of your Father's work, which you have already done. So I would make a monument of your Father's work. Then he asked me, what monument? I said, I would try to build a temple or a shrine with this. He smiled and then blessed me. After his samadhi, I was trying several sources, but finally it turned out to be our carpenter. Probably I mentioned all this yesterday. Now, why did he smoke so much? Because the ashram was coming up. He was doing so much work upon this ashram, day after day after day. That is how his health began to decline. I was thinking, why would he smoke? It's an ashram, he could just raise his hand and the ashram would come up. But why is he doing so much hard work? From time to time he would make some comments also about the ashram building or anything related to the ashram, and then he would take to smoking. So this was so much on my mind. One day a book arrived by post from Professor Dr. Makarand Paranjpe. It was a book on Delhi Sri Aurobindo Center. Bhagwan said, Devaki, start reading. Bhagwan was all eagerness. And so was I, so I started to read out. And there was a mention of this, that when they wanted to choose a place for Sri Aurobindo's relic center, they were trying out so many places. And the gentleman who was trying out, I have forgotten the name. The book is still in Sudama cupboard. So he started to look for, and he finally found a place, a very big place in fact, but it was a dilapidated building and it was a haunted place. Nobody would go near. The owner of the place said, look, I myself don't go there, but if you want it for Sri Aurobindo, you can take it free. Now this gentleman didn't know how to deal with it. And finally the order came from Pondicherry, probably from Mother, that it would be all right, that they would consider this, they would take it. And soon after that this gentleman was wondering how. And then one day someone walked in, someone who looked radiant, looked very different from the ordinary people. He came to see this gentleman and said, you're saying it's a haunted place. Okay, I can do something about it if you would let me in, but don't come that side for 3 days. Let me be in the house for 3 days. Don't come anywhere near the house. And then the gentleman saw him walking into the house. And it was only 3 days after, out of curiosity, he came back. Now, this sadhu who went inside came out. His kurta was torn in several places. It looked as though somebody had done it violently. And his hair was also very ruffled. It was as though somebody had pulled him, some people, not just one person. and he looked very, very tired. He looked a very different person altogether. The one who looked radiant and fresh when he entered looked now very different, very tired, worn out, and all his appearance spoke volumes of what he must have suffered inside from the beings. When I came to this spot, I looked up, terrified, because I knew Bhagwan was doing so much work for the ashram. And suddenly it flashed that Bhagwan was fighting too so many negative forces. On the spot there. And that's why he looked very tired and his health was declining. So obvious to all of us. He would hardly speak. He would hardly smile. He was a man of much laughter and cheer. He began to look very different. All I could see outwardly was only his tiredness. So you see, we do not know what is involved in the making of an ashram. We can only see the physical, but even at the physical level, so many things happened. A boy was getting hurt by a spark of fire, and immediately Bhagwan and Sudama, all of a sudden, he got up and said he was coming to the ashram. And he came at the right time because the boy had become unconscious. And Bhagwan put his hand on his chest and arranged for him to be taken to the hospital. Of course, the treatment became much easier after Bhagwan touched the boy. And then the truss, weighing several tons, and about 9 of them had to be lifted up to the very roof, the high roof of Pradhan Mandir, and so many workers. What a burden it must have been, because this was additional work. He was doing something else as father's work, and this ashram in the making was extra work. He never wanted an ashram in the first place. For many, many years, if people asked him, he would say no, a very firm, definite no, with emphasis. But now, after he consented, he was all work. It was all concentration on the work. So you see, such moments give us glimpses of what he must have faced, fought, and won over. So this ashram, one day, he looked at me, he was seated in the chair, and I was sitting in the hut with Ma Vijayalakshmi. He looked at me because I was thinking all that he had gone through, and he looked very, very tired. He looked at me and he knew my thoughts immediately. He said, Devaki, come here. He said, this ashram is full of my father's energy, my father's power. People who come into this ashram will instantly feel a certain peace and joy, despite all their problems. And then he called his attendant. Sri Raj Mohan was there with him at the time, now and then, and Selvaraj. He called Sri Raj Mohan and said, "You now go outside the gate, stand there for some time, and then come inside and stand there for some time. After that you come and report to me." So I was waiting for what was going to develop after that. I had no idea what Bhagwan was up to. Soon after, Sri Raj Mohan came inside to Bhagwan and said, "Bhagwan, I stood outside and felt the vibration of a very high energy, the energy of Tiruvannamalai. And then as you ordered, I came inside and stood there in the land of the ashram." And then he said, surprised, delighted, he declared, but inside the ashram, it was far beyond that. It was very, very high energy, much more than what I felt outside. It was extraordinary inside. Then Bhagwan blessed him and looked at me and smiled. Then I knew. I understood. Now our ashram is permanently an abode of God's power, high power, and the blessing grace, all because of Bhagwan's smoking. So we'll come to the point. So you see, it was at the cost of his health that he built this ashram, established his godhood. And he told me, no matter what, the spiritual atmosphere of the ashram must be kept up. We don't have to multiply charitable activities. Minimum will do. There are many social institutions for that. But this place is only for spiritual activities. See that the spiritual atmosphere of the ashram is kept up. So you see how important it is to come to the ashram, to visit the ashram with longing to see Bhagwan's Murti, where he is so much alive. He is a living force. One darshan of the Shila Murti, which is no Murti, it is he himself, though he would say my father himself. One prayer before him, we know instantly we would be helped. Now to this Bhagwan we shall submit today's prayers. Bhagwan, thou art the cosmic controller. Only you can do something about the prevalent situation. We get news, like I said yesterday, so many news. So many people getting admitted in the hospital. Once again, the hospitals are full. And there are many people without beds. The basic, the minimum comfort from a hospital. We do not know why the situation developed. Of course, much because of the carelessness of people. Because some time back, the situation, the atmosphere in Tamil Nadu was very different. It was much, much, much less that we began to believe that this coronavirus was leaving it has lost all its power. And now this has suddenly started, and they say it's a variant of corona. Only Bhagwan could kill these viruses, just as he used to do in other avatars. The destruction of these asuras, the Rakshasas, who played havoc in the lives of the demigods and the people of the earth. So once again, the same asuras have come in a different form. Only Bhagwan could descend and do once again the clearing of this. We beg you, Bhagwan, again and again, for the bestowal of that grace which would kill this virus, stop the spread of the disease, remove all the panic of the pandemic. Bhagwan, please bless all those great soldiers who are fighting the disease at the very risk of their lives. Please give a boost to economy, and above all, constant remembrance of your name and the attitude to go about our lives as a fitting instrument in your hands, making an offering of our entire life. And Bhagwan, finally, please bless us to be able to see in every happening only your presence and your blessing. Jai Yogi Ramsuratkumar.